The silence in that conference room was dead silent. 127 employees sat frozen as Margaret Sullivan, our CEO, slammed her manicured fist on the mahogany table. Even the usual phone buzzers and keyboard tappers went quiet. Every breath felt amplified in that space. "Stand up right now and apologize to my son for your incompetence, or clean out your desk," Margaret announced, her voice carrying across TechShield Aerospace's main conference hall. Her voice had that sharp edge that made grown men flinch. Her son David, hired exactly 12 months ago and mysteriously promoted to Director of Innovation just last week, sat there with this smug little smile. Kid thought he owned the world. I felt the weight of 127 pairs of eyes turning to me. I'm Alex Brennan, by the way. 48 years old, been in cybersecurity for 20 years, total 10 in the Army, then 4 years at Morrison Defense Systems, and the last 6 years here at TechShield. Never thought I'd be sitting in a corporate firing squad at this stage of my career, especially not over a $350 million NASA contract that I'd spent 18 months developing. I stood up slowly, chair scraping against the floor. The walk to the front felt like it took forever, each step echoing in that quiet room. Margaret's smile got wider, thinking she had me trapped. She figured I'd crumble under public humiliation rather than lose the job that helped pay my daughter Sarah's college tuition. Woman never really knew me at all. I connected my personal device to the display system. The projector hummed to life. "I believe this will clarify the situation," I said, keeping my voice steady. Margaret's smile vanished when I didn't launch into an apology. Instead, I tapped the screen. David's voice filled the room. "Mom, I totally screwed up the quantum encryption protocols for NASA. I accidentally left a backdoor in the AES 256 security framework. But don't worry, I already told everyone it was Alex's fault." Then Margaret's unmistakable voice. "Perfect, son. Keep blaming him for everything. Once this $350 million contract goes through, we'll restructure the entire department anyway. Just hold tight until our bonus clears." Shocked gasps rippled through the room. Margaret lunged toward me, her expensive heels clicking on the carpet. "That's private. Turn that off immediately." Our board chairman, William Bennett, held up his hand. "Continue," he said, his face hardening. I nodded and played the next recording. "Just delete his quantum key distribution protocols before the NASA meeting," Margaret instructed. "Say there was a version control issue. We need them to see only your framework, David." "But what if they ask technical questions about quantum entanglement encryption I can't answer?" David whined like a teenager who forgot his homework. "Then you look at Alex and say, perhaps you can explain why your legacy system failed these basic penetration tests. Make him look like an old-school dinosaur who can't handle modern threats with each new recording." Margaret's face lost color. David sank lower in his seat, no longer smirking. Kid looked like he wanted to disappear. The room stayed absolutely still as I disconnected my device and returned to my seat. Margaret stood frozen at the front, mouth opening and closing without sound. But I knew this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. Look, let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. Until exactly 12 months ago, I was the go-to guy for cybersecurity here at TechShield Aerospace. Spent 20 years building my reputation through solid work and battle-tested security frameworks. My colleagues respected me. Upper management consulted me. NASA specifically requested me for their quantum security projects. Then Margaret hired her son, David. I remember David's first day. Designer suit, expensive watch, introduced himself by announcing he'd graduated from Harvard with an MBA. Later, I found out he'd barely passed and been on academic probation twice for cheating on his cryptocurrency trading assignments. Should have seen that red flag coming. "Alex, you'll be mentoring David," Margaret announced during a department meeting 3 days after David started. "Show him everything you know about our quantum security protocols." I noticed several colleagues exchanging glances. Everyone understood what mentoring the boss's son meant, babysitting an entitled kid while maintaining my full workload. Been there, done that in the Army with generals' sons. That afternoon, David sat beside my desk, scrolling through his phone while I explained our penetration testing procedures for aerospace systems. "This is so boring," he sighed after 10 minutes. "Can't you just give me the executive summary? I mean, it's all about AI and automation now, right?" "Understanding the methodology is crucial," I explained. "Otherwise, you can't identify real vulnerabilities when you're securing satellite communications or navigation systems. Otherwise what? My mom runs this company. I don't need to understand every technical detail. That's what junior developers are for. Yeah, I should have seen it coming right then. But I still believed in merit and hard work, still believed the system would reward competence. What a fool I was. The first project I assigned David was straightforward: conduct a basic security audit on our internal quantum research database. Standard stuff we'd done dozens of times for NASA clearance requirements. I gave him templates, clear instructions, and my direct extension for questions. 3 days later, at the department review, David presented a completely different analysis than what I'd requested. The audit was superficial, missing critical encryption vulnerabilities in our quantum key distribution protocols, and several conclusions contradicted our established security standards. When Bennett asked about the discrepancies, David turned to me with wide eyes. Alex told me to simplify it this way. He said the old quantum protocols were too complex for modern implementation. Every eye in the room turned to me. That's not correct, I said carefully. The instructions I provided were standard protocol for... Are you calling my son a liar? Margaret interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. Here's the thing in the military. You learn to recognize an ambush when you see one. This was textbook. But I was caught in civilian territory with civilian rules. The meeting continued with me trying to salvage the presentation while defending my reputation. Afterward, Margaret pulled me into her office. Woman had this corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the aerospace testing facility. Probably cost more than my annual salary to furnish. If you can't work effectively with David, maybe we need to reevaluate your position, she said, examining her nails like she was bored. He's new and learning innovative approaches. You're supposedly experienced. Any failures reflect more poorly on you than him. That was just the beginning. Over the next few months, David took credit for my successful work while blaming me for his mistakes. Quantum security protocols I developed were mysteriously altered before reaching NASA clients. Client emails I sent were intercepted and modified. My performance reviews went from excellent to mediocre practically overnight. Colleagues who had once sought my technical advice now avoided me in the hallways. 20 years of building my career was dissolving before my eyes, and there wasn't anything I could do about it through normal channels. The breaking point came during preparations for the NASA Artemis cybersecurity contract. The biggest deal our company had pursued, $350 million over 5 years to secure critical communication infrastructure across 15 lunar and Mars mission installations. That's $70 million annually, enough to triple our current revenue. I spent weeks developing comprehensive quantum encryption frameworks, analyzing threat vectors for space-based systems, and creating detailed implementation strategies. We're talking about protecting communications that travel 140 million miles to Mars with zero room for error. The quantum entanglement protocols alone took me 3 months to perfect. David contributed nothing except complaints about the long hours and questions about whether we really needed all this paranoid security for space missions. The night before our presentation to the NASA Review Board, I stayed late finalizing my protocols. The office was nearly empty when I heard voices from the break room. In the Army, you learn to move quietly and listen carefully. Old habits. Mom, I'm worried about tomorrow. Alex's quantum framework is really complex. What if they ask me technical questions about encryption key distribution in zero-gravity environments? I froze outside the door. David's voice had that whiny quality it got when he was stressed. Don't worry, son, Margaret replied. I've already spoken to Bennett about your concerns regarding Alex's work. I suggested you present an alternative framework which our contracted consultants helped create last night. We'll let NASA decide which approach is better, but his protocols are actually solid. I ran them through the testing suite. The quantum key distribution passes all penetration tests. Quantum security can be implemented many ways. We'll just frame his as unnecessarily paranoid and expensive for space applications. Trust me, by next month you'll be leading that department, and Alex will be looking for a new job. I backed away silently. Everything suddenly made sense: the altered reports, the missing emails, the whisper campaign against me. This wasn't incompetence or office politics. This was a coordinated operation to destroy my career. That night, I made a decision. Time to go operational. I would document everything. Started keeping my phone nearby during meetings and saving every version of my work with digital timestamps. Not for revenge, for survival. The next day, I watched in silent fury as David presented his alternative quantum security framework to the NASA board. It was an almost exact copy of my work from 8 months earlier, but with the encryption standards weakened and the monitoring protocols simplified. Basically, he'd taken a bulletproof vest and removed half the protection. "I'm concerned about the overly complex approach Alex prepared," David said, flashing a worried look at the board members. "It's unnecessarily paranoid and could slow down critical mission operations. My framework maintains security while improving efficiency for space-based applications. I waited for someone to recognize my previous work, but no one did. Or if they did, they said nothing." NASA engineers on the board should have caught the technical flaws, but they were focused on cost projections and implementation timelines. After the meeting, Bennett called me into his office. "Alex, I'm concerned about your recent work. David's framework seems much more practical for our operational needs." "Sir, the framework he presented uses quantum encryption that's vulnerable to standard penetration tools. Any halfway decent hacker could compromise satellite communications during critical mission phases." "Are you suggesting you understand NASA requirements better than our Director of Innovation?" he interrupted, nodding toward David's newly assigned title on the org chart behind his desk. I stared at that chart. Director of Innovation. David had been with the company exactly 12 months and contributed exactly nothing of value. Meanwhile, guys with security clearances and 15-plus years experience were still stuck in senior analyst positions. "No, sir," I finally managed. "I'll review my approach." "Good. We need team players here, Alex, especially with the contract evaluation phase coming up. For the next 2 weeks, I gathered evidence like I was building an intelligence file, recovered original emails from server backups, compared document versions with their altered counterparts, recorded conversations when legally permissible, checked state laws first, naturally. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Madison Sullivan, Margaret's 23-year-old niece, worked as a marketing intern. Smart kid, computer science major at Stanford. Unlike her cousin David, she actually earned her position through a competitive internship program. Madison approached me in the parking garage one evening, glancing around nervously. "Alex, I need to show you something," she said. "My family doesn't know I'm doing this." She handed me a USB drive. Family dinner recordings from the past 3 months. Aunt Margaret and David don't exactly keep their voices down when they think only family is listening. I plugged the drive into my laptop right there in my car. The recordings were devastating. Detailed plans to frame me for security failures, discussions about selling simplified security blueprints to competitors, even conversations about embezzling bonus money from the NASA contract. "This recording from last Sunday," Madison said, pointing to one file. "They're planning to blame you for the encryption vulnerabilities they deliberately introduced into the system." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Madison's jaw tightened. "Because I've watched you mentor junior developers like me for years. You actually care about the work, about keeping people safe. Meanwhile, my cousin thinks cybersecurity is just a path to easy money. And my aunt treats this company like her personal piggy bank." She paused, then added, "Plus, I recorded David trying to install malware on your workstation last month. Thought you should know." The malware footage showed David sneaking into my office after hours, plugging in a USB device, and running code designed to steal my quantum encryption algorithms. Clear corporate espionage. That's when I knew we had them. I reached out to former employees who'd left under similar circumstances. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about David. Margaret had been systematically pushing out talented employees who might threaten her position or refuse to play along with her schemes. 3 former employees confirmed the pattern. Jennifer Walsh, former quantum security specialist, forced out after refusing to sign off on substandard encryption protocols. Michael Torres, former penetration tester, pushed out after questioning inflated billing hours to government clients. Lisa Park, former compliance officer, restructured out after raising concerns about documentation irregularities. All had families, all had needed their jobs, all had kept quiet to protect their references. Jennifer gave me the most damaging information. Margaret's been selling watered-down versions of our security frameworks to Orbital Dynamics for the past 18 months, she said during our coffee meeting. That's why she needed David to present simplified protocols. They match what she's already promised the competition. Michael had documentation showing billing fraud. "Look at these timesheets," he said, spreading papers across the table. David billed 80 hours a week for quantum algorithm development. I watched him play mobile games most afternoons. Lisa provided the regulatory violations. Margaret's been submitting false compliance reports to NASA about our security certifications. Half the protocols David claims to have developed don't even exist in our systems. The picture was clear this was corporate espionage and fraud on a massive scale, not just nepotism gone wrong. Then came the week that changed everything. The NASA contract was proceeding based on David's flawed framework, and security issues were emerging exactly like I'd predicted. Rather than acknowledge these problems, Margaret decided to find a scapegoat. Me. The morning before the all-hands meeting, she cornered me in the elevator. "Tomorrow's meeting won't be pleasant for you," she said with that tight smile she probably practiced in the mirror. "But if you publicly apologize for your mistakes and acknowledge David's superior work, I might consider keeping you on in a reduced capacity, maybe move you to our internal IT support team." I looked her directly in the eyes. "And if I don't? Then empty your desk before you leave today." "Your choice, Alex. But understand I have connections throughout this industry. One phone call from me, and you'll never work aerospace security again." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out, confident in her victory. She had no idea what was coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. My career, my reputation, my daughter's college fund, everything I'd worked for hung in the balance. Was I really prepared to risk it all? At 48, starting over in cybersecurity isn't exactly easy. Most companies want young hotshots, not guys pushing 50. Sarah's tuition at State was $28,000 a year. I had maybe 6 months of expenses saved up. My ex-wife wasn't contributing much since her remarriage. This job wasn't just my career, it was my daughter's future. As dawn broke, I made the call that would change everything. Dialed up Jonathan Hayes, a buddy from my Army days who now worked cybersecurity for NASA. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and John understood the importance of operational security better than most. "John, it's Alex. I need you to witness something today." "Everything all right? You sound like you're planning something." "Maybe I am." "Can you meet me for coffee before work?" We met at a diner near the office. I showed him the recordings, the altered documents, the pattern of sabotage. John listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes in that careful way intelligence guys do. "The quantum key distribution protocols they're using," I explained. "They're vulnerable to basic man-in-the-middle attacks. Any hostile nation with decent hackers could intercept communications between Earth and Mars missions." John's face darkened. "You're talking about compromising national security." "Exactly. And Margaret knows it. She's prioritizing profit over protecting astronauts." When I finished, he closed his notebook. "Why come to me instead of your board directly?" "Because Bennett has been dismissing concerns about Margaret for months. You're the only person with enough pull who might actually care about what's happening to a NASA contract." He nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Attend today's meeting. Witness what happens. Then decide if this company should be trusted with national security." John checked his watch. "I'll make some calls. But Alex, once this ball starts rolling, there's no stopping it." "You sure you want to go down this road?" "Already too far down to turn back." I arrived at the office an hour before the meeting. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed unfamiliar faces in suits speaking quietly with Bennett in his office. The conversation looked serious. Lots of hand gestures and document passing. My desk phone rang. "Alex, come to my office now." Bennett's voice was clipped. Walking across that floor felt like crossing a minefield. Every eye tracked my movement, speculation rippling through the department. They all expected today to be my last day. Hell, maybe they were right. Bennett wasn't alone when I entered. 2 NASA officials in dress blues and a woman I didn't recognize sat with him. John was nowhere to be seen, but I caught his reflection in the window standing in the hallway, observing. "Close the door," Bennett said. I did, fighting to keep my breathing steady. "These are serious accusations you've made," he began, tapping a folder on his desk. "Margaret's been with this company for 14 years and generated significant growth." "Yes," I agreed, "by taking credit for other people's work and eliminating anyone who threatens her position." The unknown woman leaned forward. "I'm Patricia Wells from NASA Inspector General. We've reviewed the materials you provided to Mr. Bennett. While recordings made without consent can be legally problematic, the documentation of altered security protocols presents a pattern we cannot ignore. Here it comes, I thought. They're going to protect Margaret and throw me under the bus. However," Patricia continued, "the testimonies from former employees and the compromised quantum encryption framework present a national security concern that supersedes internal company politics." Bennett sighed heavily. We're in a difficult position. The NASA contract is proceeding based on security protocols that may be fundamentally flawed. They are, I confirmed. But there's still time to implement proper security if we act quickly. The NASA officials exchanged glances. The all-hands meeting begins in 20 minutes. Margaret expects to publicly discipline you, after which she'll announce David's promotion to department director. And now? I asked. Now we want to see exactly how far they'll go, Bennett said. You'll attend the meeting as planned. Let Margaret make her accusations. Respond as you see fit. You're using me as bait. We're giving you the opportunity to defend yourself publicly, the NASA official corrected. Something you've earned through 10 years of military service and 20 years protecting national security systems. As they laid out the plan, I realized I was walking into a coordinated operation. If Margaret felt threatened, no telling what she might do or say. My evidence might not be enough. My career might still end today, but at least I'd go down swinging. The main hall filled quickly as employees filed in for the mandatory all-hands meeting. I took a seat near the back, ignoring whispers and sidelong glances. David sat with the executive team at the front, posture radiating confidence. Kid had no idea what was about to hit him. Margaret stood at the podium reviewing her notes, occasionally looking up to scan the room. Her eyes found mine. She smiled that predator smile. Bennett opened with standard announcements about quarterly goals and upcoming projects. Then he turned the floor over to Margaret. Thank you, Bill. Before we discuss department updates, there's a personnel matter we need to address. Her voice carried easily across the room. Over the past several months, we've experienced concerning issues with security work coming from our cybersecurity team, specifically work overseen by Alex Brennan. A murmur rippled through the audience. Here we go. Most recently, his flawed quantum security protocols nearly compromised our NASA contract. Fortunately, our Director of Innovation, David, identified the problems and provided corrected frameworks. Margaret's gaze swept the room like a sniper acquiring targets. This pattern of undermining company initiatives cannot continue. Alex, please stand. And there it was, the moment everything had led to. I rose slowly, aware of every eye turning to me. In the Army, we called this contact the moment when planning meets reality and everything goes to hell. Accountability is a core value at this company, Margaret continued. We all make mistakes, but refusing to acknowledge them is unacceptable. I walked to the front of the room, connected my device to the display system, and looked Margaret straight in the eye. You're absolutely right about accountability, I said, so let's talk about what really happened. That's when I hit play on the recordings I'd already shown you. But this time, I had more. After the shocked gasps from the first recordings, I played Madison's family dinner footage. David, just copy Alex's AES 256 protocols but weaken the key distribution. Margaret's voice came through crystal clear. NASA won't notice until after we've collected the first year's payment. What about the Mars mission communications? David asked. By the time they realize the vulnerabilities, we'll have our money and you'll be running the department. Alex will be long gone. The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Then I played the malware installation footage. David's face appeared on screen, clearly visible as he plugged his USB into my workstation and ran code to steal my quantum algorithms. That's enough, Margaret shouted, completely losing it. That's private property. This is corporate espionage. You're right, said a voice from the back. It is. Every head turned as John walked forward, accompanied by the NASA officials and 2 FBI agents I hadn't seen before. This meeting was supposed to be internal, Margaret sputtered. I invited them, Bennett said coldly, after receiving concerning information yesterday about potential national security violations. Margaret's face went white as she realized she'd walked straight into an ambush. She turned to David, who looked equally panicked. This is a misunderstanding, Margaret insisted, her voice getting higher. Those recordings are taken out of context. Alex has been underperforming for months. Ask anyone in his department. Actually, said a quiet voice from the third row. That's not true. Sarah Martinez, a junior security analyst I'd barely spoken to in weeks, stood up. Took guts for a junior employee to speak up like that. Alex trained me when I started 2 years ago. Everything I know about quantum penetration testing came from him. But 3 months ago, Margaret told me to simplify Alex's security protocols to make them more cost-effective. When I refused, I was removed from the NASA team. One by one, other colleagues stood up. Each had a story. pressure to alter security standards, instructions to exclude me from meetings, directives to report my non-existent mistakes. Margaret looked wildly around the room, her carefully constructed empire crumbling. David, tell them. Tell them how Alex tried to sabotage you. All eyes turned to David, who seemed to shrink in his chair like a deflating balloon. I just did what you told me to, Mom. The FBI agents moved forward. Ms. Sullivan, we need to speak with you privately about these allegations, particularly as they relate to the security protocols presented to NASA and potential violations of the Economic Espionage Act. Margaret grabbed David's arm. Say nothing without our lawyer present, she hissed. Then, trying to salvage some dignity, she straightened her jacket and addressed the room. This is a witch hunt based on misleading evidence. The truth will come out. As security escorted them from the hall, Bennett stepped to the podium. This meeting is adjourned. Department heads, join me in the conference room immediately. Everyone else, take an early lunch. We'll send communication this afternoon. People filed out in stunned silence, some offering quiet words of support as they passed. Others looked away, probably ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. Bennett approached as the room emptied. That took guts, he said quietly. More than I've shown, clearly. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new office, Margaret's old corner office, actually reviewing applications for our expanded quantum cybersecurity team. The NASA contract proceeded on honest terms after we implemented proper encryption protocols. Our stock took a hit when the scandal broke, but recovered quickly as clients responded to our new transparency initiatives. Most importantly, we implemented a comprehensive whistleblower program designed with input from employees who'd been victimized. No one would ever face what I had faced. My phone buzzed with a text from John. Lunch today. Have updates on the new quantum security standards for the Mars missions. I smiled, remembering how it all began. Not with some grand plan for revenge, but with a simple refusal to be silenced. The company promoted me to Chief Security Officer with a 45% salary increase. My first act was hiring back Jennifer, Michael, and Lisa with apologies and back pay. David ended up working at his uncle's auto repair shop, learning what real work feels like. Margaret? Last I heard, she was facing federal charges for economic espionage and NASA contract fraud. The FBI traced her side deals with Orbital Dynamics back 18 months. Turns out selling national security secrets carries a 15-year federal sentence. But here's the thing that really matters. My daughter Sarah called last week. She's a junior at State studying cybersecurity, inspired by watching her old man fight the good fight. Dad, she said, I want to work somewhere that values integrity like your company does now. Maybe NASA someday. That's worth more than any promotion or salary increase. Building something better for the next generation, making sure they don't have to fight the same battles we did. If this story resonates with you, remember this. Sometimes standing up for what's right is the only choice that lets you sleep at night. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. You don't have to be a hero to do the right thing. You just have to refuse to be part of the problem. That's how you change the game.